Hey, Faber here. Gopsha and I are here today to talk about the brand new and brand old light cones that appear in patch 2.5. As always, they have to happen at the end of the first half due to the second half's cones only being recently revealed. We have 2 new limited light cones, 4 reruns, and also a brand new 4-star cone. I'm going to go through every new light cone, as well as the 5-star rerun cones, evaluating them all for their signature character, as well as other characters. So like and sub if this video helps or if you want to see more of these, and let's begin. So our first half first. We have Feixiao, Robin, Black Swan and Kafka's cones all jam-packed into one side. Feixiao's signature boasts a high base attack, a decent crit rate buff, and a stacking def ignore on ultimates. Feixiao's damage is mostly in her ultimates, so this was designed around that, which makes it kind of weak on our current hunt roster. So for Feixiao herself, this cone is 21% better than Stellar C for her personal damage. So if you're running her full hyper carry, this is the number we're looking at. But when considering she is in a normal team environment with a sub DPS, then maybe a Robin and maybe a Venturine, the damage increase this cone provides for the whole team damage overall drops to 13.4% from what I found. Still great of course. But again, on Feixiao herself, if you pulled Ratio's cone, you could just use that, as it is very close in power. Sometimes it can even beat it in damage per screenshot if you have all debuffs up and you build your crit ratio around it. But accounting for debuff uptime can see it drop slightly in a longer fight, and not all teams maximize debuffs. Either way, it's incredibly viable on her, you just have to have been one of the Ratio simps back in 1.6. For other units as well though, this cone isn't doing anything crazy. Bootil doesn't want it, he's a break DPS. Ratio and Moze are all about their follow-ups, not ultimate damage. Topaz doesn't do ultimate damage. Zila, Sushang, and Dan Heng don't have follow-up attacks. March is all about enhanced basics and wouldn't have great uptime anyway. As for Yanqing, he could use this as he does have big bomber ultimates, but his follow-ups are not guaranteed even in 2024. The reason Feixiao really abuses the cone is her ult-centric kit, but also the fact that she has 2 follow-ups a turn, on top of her ult also being considered a follow-up. So this cone is niche to Feixiao herself, but it's great on her. Ratio's cone exists if not, and Stellar C works just fine too, it's a little drop in power. This light cone is not like Acheron's one that gives her a big DPS increase on top of stack generation. Other follow-up units on DPS build would rather go Ratio's cone, and as sub DPS they would rather go Topaz's cone. Now for Flowing Nightglow. This cone gives a stacking 3% energy regen rate buff up to 5 stacks whenever an ally attacks. This can take a while in hypercarry teams, but in dual DPS and follow-up ones, this stacks up extremely quickly. Upon ulting we remove this and gain a self-attack buff on top of a team-wide allied damage percent buff, and the energy regen boost can be regained by having allies attack yet again. The problem with the attack and damage buffs is they only last for 1 turn, and they are based on the Harmony unit. So all those super fast Harmony units, you're going to lose out on this very quickly. And all those Harmony units that ult on ally turns rather than their own, you're not going to get the extra action worth of buff duration. The reason Robin uses it so well is because she legit just dips out for a while when ulting. The energy is also super varying, and therefore we can't really make any consistent rotations with it. But on a unit like Robin with 160 energy and a large amount of RNG energy already, it doesn't really matter. She just really likes energy regen whenever she can get it. It's really nice on her and you can feel the energy it provides, but Bronya's cone is a completely fine alternative for that. For an alternative to the attack percent, Bronya's cone has a decent base attack, but you also have Robin's free-to-play cone as well, though the difference between the two is pretty decent. And for an alternative to the damage amp, you have the brand new Poised to Bloom light cone. You might not have any copies of it at all though, it was in 2.4 second half after all. I don't think you need this cone as she is an incredible E0S0 unit, but it's a fantastic pull if you often find yourself lacking in energy on Robin, or you want a nice damage boost to your team. E1 Robin is also pretty spicy though, don't ignore that. This cone also isn't great on other harmonies. Someone might say Ting Yun, but her best rotation is only achievable through cogs and memories. And for Zero's cycle, she runs Dance Dance Dance. Furthermore, her attack buff is a snapshot, so you'd have to reactivate her skill after ulting to use the attack percent. And she is going to be cycling this buff out very fast with her high innate speed. Let me know if you found some weird use for this outside of Robin. Black Swan's signature is up next. Reforged Remembrance first offers a 40% EHR buff, decent for every nihility not named Acheron or Kafka E0. Then you gain a permanent stack of profit when dealing damage to an enemy with each different type of elemental dot effect. Therefore, we get 4 stacks maximum, and each stack provides 5% attack on top of specifically 7.2% def ignore to dots only. So first off, non-dot units get out of the room. As for the effect itself, it's powerful at max amp, especially when considering the prisoner set on top. But getting 4 stacks is a tough task outside of literally Black Swan only. Now, Black Swan does technically enable this on another unit due to her ultimate making her Arcanic counters all dot types, but why do you have 2 Black Swan signatures? For Black Swan herself, it's her best for personal damage of course. But when accounting for a dot team's overall damage, Gaucho's Light Cone is slightly better whilst also being more universal. Of course, it doesn't have Black Swan on it. And for other dot units, I wouldn't bother with Black Swan's Light Cone. I think this cone is probably the weakest to go for in the patch. And again, we also have the E1 Robin part where E1 Black Swan is very powerful for damage amp, with the only benefit of the Light Cone being that the banner is cheaper to pull on. Now finishing the first half is Patience is all you need. I put it last because it just makes sense. A nice base attack, a permanent 24% damage buff, and a stacking speed buff up to 14.4% on attacks already sounds pretty cool. And then we get our very own shock debuff that we can apply on top. Now the speed buff isn't instant, you have to attack, to take that into consideration when trying to build for it. An attacking technique like Kafka's counts, which helps. But if you do build around it, it means you can start allocating more speed subsets into attack percent ones or crit ones on some units while still making breakpoints. Or you can use the speed to reach even greater breakpoints. And the Erode is fantastic for dot units as it helps maximize the prisoner set's death shred. It is also fantastic for detonators for more damage, and it is fantastic for a dot DPS paired with Black Swan, as enemies will gain more Arcana stacks from having more dots. Finally, it also works if you need a debuffing Light Cone on Acheron, because even without considering the other high damaging effects, a debuff on a cone is innately powerful for her as it translates directly to ultimate generation. So Patience is all you need is a powerful cone for dot main DPS and is even great on nihility crit DPS like Acheron, Welt, and higher Eidolon Silverwolves. Though would I pull it for anyone not named Kafka? No. For Kafka specifically, whilst it isn't a giant damage increase over Good Night Sleep Well, quality of life benefits are great, and the speed makes getting to that pesky 160 goal much easier. Decent pickup if you want to improve your Kafka composition once you have Black Swan and Raw May or Robin already. And finally, onto the second half. Let's start with a brand new 4-star cone. Again, beautiful art just like Marsh's one, but again, not usable on the unit it features. I mean, unless you're a bit sussy in life. This is a break-oriented light cone, and what I love about Penacony is they've been releasing 4-star break cones, which is something we were really lacking in. The effects are simple but simply potent. A 28 to 56% break effect buff, and a 2-turn 8 to 12% speed buff. The speed is first obtained upon entering combat, which means it is instantly up for our very first turn. This is so nice as it means we can build around it accordingly, whereas the break erudition's cone speed, for example, only happens after ults. The second way to obtain it is by dealing break damage. Break damage can be the break itself, it can be a break damage proc like Boothill's talent with Pocket Trickshot, and it can even be super breaks. You can consider this permanent in a proper team setup, and a permanent 12% speed is absolutely delicious to have. So our break hunt light cones before were Boothill Sig, Adversarial, and River Flows. This does not offer the same damage increase as Boothill's, but it offers a far stronger increase to the other alternatives, since they give pretty much nothing in terms of DPS increase. For speed, it is equal to Boothill's signature as well as River Flows, and only slightly behind Adversarial, but with a much easier condition. So this is very simple. It is the second best in slot for every Break Hunt DPS. That can be Sushong, Boothill, and Break March 7th. For Boothill specifically, let's see the damage difference. His Sig will give him an extra 4% break effect, a base attack increase, and 20% def ignore on breaks. Considering all its benefits in a team calc with 0% def shred, his signature only results in a 10% DPS increase over this new cone. This became 11.1% with his E1, and with E0 and Pella, it went to a 14.9% difference. So that Def Ignore is still powerful, especially with upgrades like E1 Boot Hill, E1 Raw May, but the difference is not as substantial as versus Adversarial or Crit Light Cones. Nice to hear for the cowboy lovers. The new 5-star Light Cone of the second half is Lingsha's. We get a 60% break effect buff, and a 2-turn 18% vulnerability when dealing damage with your ult, 10% if you don't have enough break effect. This already limits us to Lingsha and Gallagher only, realistically. Now 18% vulnerability by itself is really nice, and having it from a sustain is even cooler. It's a straight up damage increase to all damage types in the game. But let's consider our top team archetypes. Follow-up teams with Feixiao or Yunli generally use Topaz, maybe Moze, giving a 50 to 25% vulnerability to follow-ups. Acheron's best team uses Jiao Cho, a 35 to 50 to even 74% vulnerability on that bad boy. Boot Hill and Firefly have built-in vulnerability, and Firefly's signature has more on top. Not to mention that Gallagher and Lingsha have break vulnerability on their debuffs. Of course, having some doesn't make this bad, it just isn't as rare of a multiplier anymore. Also, I'm surprised they didn't make this 24% like Jiao Cho's, since it feels like it's the same cone, they just copy their own homework and change it a little. The other thing to account for is the debuff uptime, as it is only 2 turns and it's linked to ults. Fast enemies will delete the uptime even further. Since it is geared for break sustains, in their break teams the uptime is much better since you get massive delays, but outside of them it will be consumed very fast. So when accounting for Firefly's own vulnerability as well as debuff uptime on a 160 speed enemy, Lingsha going from post-op S5 to her signature resulted in an 8.75% team DPS increase. Her E1 for reference here is around 20%. And with Gallagher, who has a slower rotation in the same setup, Gallagher going from multiplication S5 to Lingsha's signature results in a 3.98% team damage increase. I can see this cone being used as a way to guarantee better doctor ratio debuff consistency, but again it's only 2 turns. And I can see it being nice outside of break for these 2 units. It might be fine for 0 cycling as it won't fall off in time. For Gallagher, I'd much rather you just use multiplication otherwise in SP heavy teams, and quid pro quo in Robin teams, as it's irreplaceable there. Finally, Topaz's signature, which still has the cutest art so far. Great base attack, crit rate buff, a follow-up damage buff, and a crit damage debuff from the wearer's follow-up attacks. This is the best Hunt Light Cone for Hunt follow-up sub DPS on their sub DPS build. This is Topaz, Moze, and March. It is also a great cone in general for follow-up main DPS if you don't have this signature, so for Ratio and Feixiao. The versatility alone makes it a pretty good pickup if you were going to get any cone. But just like Lingsha's, it can be diluted, and crit damage is way more common than vulnerability. As stated in my Feixiao and Moze guides, we are getting a whole ton of crit damage buffs lately. So in a Feixiao Topaz Robin Aventurine comp, this cone, if considered up permanently at max stacks, will give a 6.8% team damage increase. And whilst that's nice, a Robin E1 is over 3 times stronger. I like this cone, I even picked it up myself on my main for fun account, but I find that the main benefit isn't the damage increase for the team, but rather 3 other things. First off, for Ratio comps, this provides another debuff which he really appreciates for follow-up consistency and his own self-damage percent buff. Secondly, it's a really good stat stick with its high crit rate buff, and it is viable if not best in slot for most relevant Hunt units. Third, there aren't many great free-to-play Light Cone for Hunt units. Final Victor is decent on some units, but the static gifts aren't very rare. Swordplay is great on some again, but in multi-target fights you can end up losing the maximum buff a lot. River Flows is very weak, and Stellar Sea is fantastic, but it's probably already occupied. With the increase of dual hunt teams, or in general, the increase of hunt relevancy, having a solid cone like this is really nice. On a final unrelated note, this cone is really fun for making meme Acheron teams, for example this Feixiao Acheron team from my Ask Guoba video. So I think it's a great pickup for these reasons, just don't expect your team damage to explode with it in a Feixiao or Yunli comp with their insane crit damage stacking. I hope this video helped you a bit to discover the true power behind some of these cones in a proper environment. Thank you so much for watching, as well as to my amazing YouTube members, and have a Guoba day.